we are still kind of in a new reality of sorting through where are all the places that this impacts how we do business day to day. And all of that is still being discovered by practitioners, by people who are in the weeds, leveraging it, putting it to use, seeing where it's useful, where it's not, like what is it capable of, what is it not capable of. And that has been, for me, locking arms with other people who are doing this work, who are getting in the weeds, who are putting it to test and seeing what's working. That's where some of the biggest insights and impacts have come for me, is being able to see what's actually practically being useful. Not what are because like all the companies are going to lean on the hype and the pie in the sky vision of someday it'll be able to do this. In this episode, we're going to be diving into what I'm doing to create the content that I need to from the stuff that I'm doing anyway, right? What am I doing to leverage the meetings that I'm having, the work that I'm doing regardless, in order to create the marketing content that ultimately I need, to grow my audience, grow my business, and grow my influence over time. Again, leveraging what I'm up to anyway. So that's what we're talking about today. With me, I have Charlie Madison, founder of Referrals While You Sleep, Realtor Waiting List, back in the Hawaiian shirts. I'm always excited to see the Hawaiian shirts. It makes me feel like we're on a tropical getaway together. Boom roasted. And yeah, just having a fun, exciting times. But Charlie, welcome back to the show. What do you think about this topic today?
It is good. It's good to be back. I'm excited. You showed me kind of behind your scenes what you did, and you did some stuff that I've never seen before. I want to find out. I've got a couple bottlenecks that I'm running into. And so I'm excited to see how you solve for that.
And yeah, so the way that we're going to do this episode, it's going to be a fairly natural conversation. Charlie's role in this kind of episode that we're going to do is to really be the student on your behalf. So you listening, you watching, you going through this information, Charlie's going to be the student, and I am here to teach through what I've done and how I've done it. So Charlie's going to actually be asking the questions, and I'm going to share the answers and go through this. So let's go ahead and dive right into it. So where do you want me to start, Charlie? What do you need more information on to set the context for everybody?
Yeah, so let's start you did a Zoom call with your team member, and then at the end, you actually verbally gave it a prompt. So start with the what, why, how, now of like just that little starting at, all right, what was your thought process? What was the prompt? How do you go from there?
Perfect. Yeah. So this meeting that we're talking about is literally like the purpose wasn't to create content. The purpose wasn't, to do anything like that. What we were doing is that I meet daily with my assistant as often as possible. Sometimes it's not always daily. I strive for daily, but so I'm typically meeting daily with her. And in that meeting, we're going over like, what are we working on? What are the tests that we've been running? That sort of thing. And in doing that, I was going over a specific strategy that we're running right now to grow my Facebook audience, of how we're reaching out to connections, etc. And I wanted to have clarity on that data to say what were we learning from it. And so like I took the data, I uploaded it into ChatGPT in order to get some clarity on it. And I was like, wow, you know what? Like this process that I just did, I'm sure other people would find value in that. So in the middle of the meeting, I literally at the end of going through that content and having those insights and having that learning that literally I was doing for myself, I said, let's turn that into a post so I could actually leverage this information. And so I started talking through that. I said, here's some of the ideas that I think should be in the post of what I think people would find valuable, what my process was, what my steps were. And I was kind of just verbalizing how I would envision that post happening. And then literally at the end of it, I just verbalized the prompt and said, here's how I want you to write it and what style, what things to pay attention to. I told it how I wanted it to do a CTA and all of that, and was able to literally just walk through that process. And you and I have been doing this for a while. I have a fairly intuitive understanding at this point of how I would think through structuring a prompt. So I just verbalized what I've naturally learned and developed over time. And then literally I took the copy and paste of that. So I was using Fireflies and I was using a Google Meet, but yeah, it works at Zoom, works at Google Meet, works anywhere where that you have the transcript. But Firefly specifically has this cool benefit where it's transcribing it live and you can copy and paste the transcript while you're still in the meeting. So I wasn't even done with the meeting. I just verbalized that, copied the transcript, and then threw it into Claude and basically just said, hey, at the end of this transcript, I cover what I want you to do. and I told you how I want you to do it, the transcript to do that for me, please. Like I didn't give it any more of a specific prompt because I kind of covered that in the transcript, right? And Claude was able to do it really well. So in the midst of the meeting, turn an insight into, I think, what will end up being a useful, powerful post just by recognizing that opportunity was there, having it already transcribed and throwing it into the right tool. And yeah, so I don't remember what the original question was, but that's kind of the overall context of what was going on.
Yeah. So you just did a training, and some point during the training, you're like, oh, this could be helpful. How do I turn this into content, basically?
And actually, it wasn't even a training. Like, we were reviewing the results of the work that I have her doing. That's what we were doing. So like I've assigned her the process of reaching out and doing those connections for me. So we were meeting together to go over the results of the work that she's been doing and just showing, going through that process of how I was analyzing those results. I turned it into content. Does that make sense? So literally we were in the midst of doing the work that we were doing regardless and turned that into an opportunity for the content.
Makes sense. So one of the things that I like, as you walk through this, the post was really good. I also really like the fact that you just verbalized it. And then at the end, so like, that's really simple for you, but break down kind of the details of the how there.
Yeah. So in terms of verbalizing it, I mean, that's where you're going to want to flow through the concepts of a mega prompt framework, right? And we've covered that in other episodes. So there's lots of information about that for how we go through and think about that. But essentially the idea is you're looking at things like, who do you want it to act as? Like having it take on a job role, thinking through what the goal is, what the task is, what the steps are, any of the clear context or constraints, etc. Like laying out, really the simplest way to put it is, what does an ideal outcome look like, said as specifically as possible. So not just write a good Facebook post, but having a real clear visual picture in your mind of what is a good Facebook post. Who are people that write the kind of post that you're looking for it to create? What are the things that make it a good Facebook post, right? Like having that clarity around it was really important, I think, in being able to get it to turn my content into what I needed it to be. And really, that's a big takeaway that a lot of people miss. I am able to get AI to do things well because I know what well looks like, right? I'm basing it off of actual experience. I'm basing it off of my opinion rather than having it come armed with the opinion. I almost want it to have zero opinion. I don't want it to have an opinion. I don't want to lean on it for an opinion because then it's going to be consensus garbage. What I want to do is I want to say, I have a hard opinion. You submit to my will and do what I'm telling you to do. And then when you do that, it actually tends to do a good job. It's able to enact your vision effectively if you could clearly communicate it. And so I have ideas in my mind. What does a good Facebook post look like? What are some of the structures that matter? What, like I have thoughts around persuasion, all that kind of get imbued into when I'm describing what makes for a good Facebook post, what that looks like. And so I verbalize those things, I tell it to do it, and then I'm able to get it to output them. So those are the kinds of things that I did. In this process, really the more opinion I could give it, the better. The more that I build my knowledge and expertise around writing something well and what does that look like, the more that I could guide it to a good outcome. Right. And so learning about those things, studying those things, getting better at like what is a good structure really helps in this sort of thing so that you could verbalize it and steer it and guide it in that direction. But the good news is once you do have those opinions, it's really easy for you to just kind of keep pointing back to them, to point back to the templates, point back to like, that's what I do at this point. I have in my mind a pretty clear structure for how I build like the kind of Facebook post that I want to build. And it's things like the first 3 lines really matter because that's what people see before they click read more. So I know that I really need to optimize those first 3 lines to capture somebody's interest, to get them to actually click to read more, to see the point of the post, right? So I tell it that. Pay attention to that hook, right? Pay attention to how you're capturing somebody's attention. I tell it things that I want it to do, like short sentences and lots of line breaks, that it's easy to skim and read. I give it people to model that I know write that way already, so that it's kind of got a secondary input that gets it in that right direction. I have specific ways that, whether right or wrong, they're at least what feels in alignment with me for how I do something like a call to action. I don't typically want it to be super hype. I don't want it to be, oversold. I want it to be a little bit more authentic, and for lack of a better word, I want it to come across cool, right? Like I want to play it cool. I don't want it to be like, join my thing, it's awesome. I want it to be more like, I got this thing. You may find it interesting and offer it up that way. And Again, that may or may not be the right way to do it, but that's the way I want to do it. And so I get it to do it that way because it feels in alignment with me. It feels in alignment with my tone of voice, that sort of thing. And then, yeah, having an opinion, forming those thoughts, doing the work to learn those skills, do the research, and developing that opinion ultimately makes it really quick for me to do that. But, for somebody else, really, that is part of the work I think about that people don't want when it comes with AI. But really, if you're going to get the best value out of what you could use these tools for, if you are expecting them to be the expert, you're going to lose because anybody can do that. So you want to develop your own expertise. You want to develop your own opinions and have it enact that and make that process quicker. And that's really what I do with that. What did I go over at too high of a level in there? What do I need to drill in on?
I like that. One of the things I've actually been doing some lately is I'm actually telling AI, do not use anything except what's in the transcript. And one of my thoughts is, I could probably create a project that has more of my unique views. And I could say, do not use anything that is not in the transcript or project files. And I've noticed when I do that, it's much more in line with what I want. Because otherwise, it's going to come up with generic slop.
Yep. I call it hot garbage. Yep. But hot exactly. Garbage. Because that's exactly what it will do. And for me, one of the phrases that I use to get that result is I tell it, lean heavily on the specific words, phrases, and ideas from the transcript, right? And so that I found that tends to work pretty well to sort of let it know, like, I am giving you the way that I want you to see the world, but I want you to adapt it into a flow that makes sense for this other platform, that makes sense for like, I was just free form thinking. Now I want you to take those thoughts and structure them well. Make it easy to digest, make more sense for this other medium, somebody who's not just sitting listening to me in the middle of a meeting, right? Like, what does it look like if I was to structure this well as a post rather than just a free-form thought?
That makes a lot of sense. So I liked that. And then it leads me to one of my questions is can I get a copy of what you did as part of your AI mastermind that I'm in? So that's one question, please. And thank you.
Yes.
And then two, one of the issues that I've ran into with, part of Referrals While You Sleep, we've got transcriptions, and I think we've got 100 posts we've created now over the last 2 weeks, is that it feels almost too formulaic. And is that something to even be concerned about? Do you care about it? Like, if you had to take all of your posts, and create little clips and then create transcripts from it, would you use one? How would you handle that? Or would you just let it run?
Good question. So first off, to answer your first question about can you get access? Yeah, as anybody that's part of Amp Intel Elite, our mastermind where we go over how to leverage AI to make your business more effective, systematic, everything that we do, anything that I have available, that gets made available to anybody in the mastermind. So you have the golden ticket access to that. Anything that we can provide to make that easier, you get access to. Right now, Amp Intel Elite is currently closed, but if people are interested, you could shoot me a message at zach@zachhammer.me is my email, or shoot me a message on Facebook, and I'll make sure you're on the waiting list for the next time that we're open. But what was I going to say? The other question about, thinking through the different formats. Again, that to me ends up coming back to, there's a couple of things within that. One is testing to see if it makes a difference, if it matters, right? Forming some sort of way to say, what is the end result that I'm looking for? And does just having it be formulaic, does it hurt that or not, right? I want a way to measure that rather than forming an arbitrary opinion, because the measuring it makes a big difference. One of the things that I really like to do when I'm talking to my clients or people in the mastermind, one of the things that I always go back to is, all things being equal, I want the easiest method, right? If there's a method that we could do that requires us to do less work, requires us to refine it less, requires us to create something new less, I'm going to default to that, right? How can I leverage what we already have? How can I leverage the work that's already being done? How can I leverage those things? I want to lead on those things wherever possible, and only add to a process where it's necessary because we're seeing that something about what we're doing isn't getting us the result that we want, right? So I really like the idea of saying, if you've already got a process that created the 1,300 posts, is there a way that you could establish some sort of test to see, does this get me the result that I'm looking for? Does it get me the result in a high enough, level? Like, do I even need to develop a different way to do this? Okay, so that's the first thing, is I just see, do I even need to do the work to come up with a different way? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So on that, I mean, walk me through that real quick. What's the end result goal of the content that you're producing?
The end result goal is to get more incoming communications, from my clients, for me. That's the goal.
Perfect. And I know how your system works overall. Like, I unfortunately feel like the way your system is really powerful, but has this unfortunate downside of it's sometimes harder for people to recognize when it's doing the result that you want it to do. And we've put together some great systems for how you could do that. But being able to track it back to this kind of test might be hard for us to get clarity on. So what you could potentially do, are you creating posts or content that are designed to get engagement, like that are designed to either get somebody to comment if they're interested in something, or does that make sense, where there's some sort of, even if it's not the ultimate ideal outcome, there's some sort of earlier stage outcome that you can measure for? Are you currently doing something like that?
Yeah, so there's some people that we do have, similar to you, kind of, hey, comment this word if, want the free thing.
Perfect. So that would be one way that you could potentially do an earlier test to see, like, hey, are we getting an engagement rate that we're happy with, that we're able to consistently see, or is it below a baseline? And for this sort of thing, what you might need to do in order to run the test is you might need to either generate a few options that are outside of what feels formulaic to see, so that you could compare, so that you have your control of what it generated plus some other options to test it against and see if it even matters, because it may not matter. You may see about the same level of engagement. Now, if you find that it does matter, turning that into a consistent thing, which is really kind of your question here, like saying, let's assume it does make a difference. If it did make a difference, the way that I start to think about that is, again, going back to really clearly being able to define and describe the different types, right? Ultimately, I see it as the work of like categorizing. Right now, your process is resulting in AI seeing everything as one type over and over again. If you can specify, actually, I think there are 5 to 10 type, right? And here's what type 1 looks like. Here's what type 2 looks like. Here's what type 3 looks like. And being able to have it take the same concept and flow it through all the different types that you come up with. Like maybe 1 is more of a how-to. Maybe 1 is more of a case study. Maybe 1 is more of a listicle. Maybe 1 is more of a one-line insider observation, right? Like those sorts of things where you can have it take essentially the same crux of the content and reflow it into different formats. That could be a way to do it. But the way that you get that to happen is, again, that comes from you build your expertise and your experience to say, let's build out our own way of looking at the world and being able to describe and communicate that back to AI, saying, create this one in type 1, and type 1 is defined as these things, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah. What I get out of that is, one, and this probably goes to, I know it goes to me, it may be to some of your other clients, but what I heard loud and clear was Don't overcomplicate it, run the system and see if it will work. Because I know I'll apply to me. I mean, for all my clients, they're not doing anything now. So I'm starting to worry already about, it looking too formulaic when, I mean, truthfully, anything is going to be better.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's one thing, like just do it and look at the result. And the other insight, from a programmer mind, I am used to programming machines in if else, if, we'll use real estate. If it's a listing, you do this checklist. If it's a buyer, you do this checklist. If it's, like that. And so I'm always thinking that I have to program, you mentioned 5 different types of articles, and I've got to program this complex flow to get the machine to decide. And my other insight is, as I do this, I can come up with the examples and have AI be, it's going to seem smart like a human. The AI can actually say, we'll move to shapes. This is a buyer. This is an investor. This is like, I don't have to program the if else as much as just say, look for these. And so that's really cool. I mean, that shaves off so much programming time.
Yeah, exactly. So you're able to build out flows that give it the guidance that it needs, where it's able to follow your directions really well. So as long as you've given it sort of the categories or templates to be able to say, hey, here's this type, rewrite this post like this, it's going to be able to follow that along really well. The way that I like to find those kinds of examples is I am very much in the camp of, I like to observe what people are doing, and then I like to describe it. right? I like to give a name to it. I like to describe the process and break it down. It's actually a skill set that I learned partially through art. So we may have talked about this before, but I don't remember if we have. So if you're thinking about how to draw something, everything that we draw is the representation of reality. It is not reality. Like if I were to draw, you do not have lines, right? Like there is no lines that make up who you are. You are form and you are shape in terms of how you're like how your facial structure works and all that. But we represent that through like trying to represent those, you know, the shape of your eyes and the shape of your face and like where your mouth sits and your ears and your hair and like all of that. We represent that with lines and shading and all of that. But still, it's ultimately sort of breaking down what we observe and giving shortcut ways for our brain to recognize similar patterns. And so I do the same thing when it comes to design, when it comes to writing social posts. I'll go and look at examples of success saying, I want to model this. I want to take something from this and now make it my own. And I will go and I'll look at it. I'll say, what is this person doing in the first bit? What are the things that I'm noticing about this? I'm noticing their first 3 lines are really impactful and really set us up to read the rest of it. I'm seeing that they're using a lot of bulleted lists. I'm seeing that the sentences are short. I'm seeing those sorts of things. And then maybe I'm noticing other things. I'm noticing things like they always lead with a question. They always lead with something of value. And like I'm giving names to these things to break them down and understand what somebody else is doing that's getting them the result so that I can understand. Essentially, I decode the matrix, right? I'm looking for what the underlying code is. And this is the thing that people miss. AI still isn't really good at that. It can be helpful and possibly give you some ideas. I find my biggest insights come from literally doing that myself because it gains an intuitive knowledge for me that builds my way of understanding the world so that I can communicate it better and I can repeat it better. Anyway, so I do that often. I do that with like website design. I do that with landing pages. I do that with social post copy. I go out and I look at what people are doing and I do the work of like writing down my notes and trying to describe it. And then I take those descriptions and I feed that into AI and see if I'm getting back what I'm looking for. And if not, I keep refining until I find the words that are getting back the things that I feel like I'm seeing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I like that. You know, what I heard from there is like, if you see a really good post, you won't just send it to AI and say, chunk this into a different, you know, group into a template that can be reused, right? Because AI literally just sees, you know, not even the characters, and it's right. Using its 80% heat index or whatever it is to figure out what it is.
Right.
You know? Whereas, so what you're doing is you're taking the thing, and I think it's what Tim Ferriss talks about in The 4-Hour Chef. He talks about his right. Deconstruction, reconstruction.
Yes.
Goes along with, you know, 80-20 Pareto principle, all that. So you use right. your intelligence and knowledge to, all right, how can I chunk this? How can I you know, without taking the exact words, how do I create a definition of these different parts? Yep. And
right.
you give the definition of the chunks to AI. And then you're saying, all right, does AI understand what I'm talking about? Or do I need to change my right. definitions? So instead of just right. looking for the perfect template or the perfect example, you use examples, but is it true? Like a lot of the heavy lifting is you deconstructing it into your own words that you think AI will understand?
And especially like figuring out the key parts to distill, where it's like, what is important about this? What doesn't feel as important? And again, it's all about, so like the way that I work this stuff at this point is I'm going out and I'm forming some sort of opinion, and then I'm figuring out how to test that opinion to see is my opinion right or wrong. And the better I am at running those tests, it makes me better at forming those opinions as well, right? Where I'm becoming right more often on the front end. But when I run those tests, either way, I bring myself back into alignment with reality because ultimately I care about the result. Is the thing that I'm doing getting the result? If not, I'm going to keep going back and retesting, figuring out what am I missing about what matters? What am I missing right. about how to structure this, etc. And so starting with something that already exists, breaking it down, building my own framework, my own way of thinking about it, and then building back up from that really helps. And I have used AI to like templatize things, and it could do okay, but you still typically need to have a way to say, no, that's not what it's doing there. That's not what I mean. I mean this sort of idea. And you want to have ways of describing something in order to make it your own so that you know if it's replicating what you're looking for or not. You don't want to just trust Like, this is the mistake that you want to avoid. Don't give it an example and tell it to run it and say, yeah, it did it perfectly without considering it. Like, did it? If you don't know if it's achieving the points that matter or not, you're just trusting the output, and who knows if it's actually worthwhile, right? Now, ultimately, if you get the end result that you're looking for, then hey, maybe that's all that you need to do. But I have found if I do that, if I just sort of give it an example and trust the output, my results are lacking. My results don't go well. That in order to get good results, I have to understand a little bit more about what's happening in order to get a good result. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I really like that. I like that. It kind of goes along with, I love the things that I've gotten is how to deconstruct and describe the templates in my own language. Because then I can test and say, is the output actually matching what I want? And, the other big insight, this started in your daily call with your teammate. You're like, ooh, this could be a great post. And so you spoke the prompt framework that sent it into Claude and said, hey, turn this into a post. Like, look at this transcript and obey the bottom. And one of the things that I'm just seeing, like, we're able to get feedback and rapidly improve, literally faster than ever that humans have ever done that. And so it's even more important. What I hear from my procrastination, it's even more important to have a goal, test a hypothesis, and I can iterate with the best copywriters in the world, with some of the best templates in the world, networking with people. Like, whereas you used to have to hire a copywriter, write it for the next magazine, put it in the magazine, wait weeks for responses. Now we're talking about, depending on how full your schedule is, you could, you can really iterate daily or hourly, really as fast as you want. And that's where the compound interest, like, there's going to be some people that are leveraging AI and their compound interest is just going to fly by compared to folks that aren't doing it at all.
I mean, what you described in terms of that process in AMP Intel Elite, that's part of what I have a framework to help people through. I call it the plan framework, where it's all about when you're putting together some sort of strategy to achieve a result, you want to be able to lay it out in a pretty specific way to know if you actually have something that's working or not. And so the P stands for purpose. What's the goal or the outcome that you're looking to move toward? The L is, what is it about? It's the milestones. It's the, forget what it stands for now. I need to rework that part. But the key idea, I think it's like the landscape, but it's the points along the way. Landmarks, that's the word that I'm looking for. Landmarks. So what are the ways that I'm going to be able to see if I have hit this goal, this purpose, right? What are the ways that I can actually measure? Because if you can't measure it, you don't know if you've done it. And you need to figure out some way to be able to measure, am I achieving the outcome that I'm looking for? And that doesn't have to be like super complicated. It can be really simple, but you want to have something in your mind that says, here's what I'm trying to achieve, and here's what I'm going to look at to determine if I'm achieving what I'm looking to do or not. And then A is all about the action steps. It's literally, what are you going to do in order to try and achieve that? I'm going to post this many times a day. I'm going to use this framework. Like, whatever it is, right? What is the plan? What are the specific actions that you're going to take? And then N is all about nurturing the end result, to recognize and understand we are off in our opinions somewhere most of the time. And most of what we need to do is just realign back toward moving toward whatever our goal is, to figure out what are we learning from the test, what are we learning as a result of the actions that we're taking, what's working, what's not, and then readjusting the plan based on what we're learning in the process. And so what you're describing of being able to say, like, right now, a lot of it is just, I'm going to form some sort of opinion and then figure out some way to test if that opinion is accurate or not, and do it based off of short-term quick tests that you could run and iterate on to see what those results look like. Because more often than not, this is what I've seen in practice. It is a lot easier for people to very confidently say, this is the right way to write something. This is the right way to do this. And it's all just the blind leading the blind of somebody handed down an opinion, somebody handed down a theory. Nobody's actually testing to see if it makes a difference, actually matters, or actually works today. And things are moving so quick at this point, like, it is very easy to sound like a confident expert with AI. The only way that we have some ability to see what's actually true and makes a difference in our business is to have an opinion, have an objective, and see if we're moving toward it. So running those tests and running them for yourself to get real world feedback is so important. And honestly, learning from people who are trying to do the same is one of the only other ways to, I think, get that input, right? Because we are more and more, we're moving into a time where it's really easy for somebody to sound like an expert and just be feeding you garbage because they haven't tested any of it. Maybe their success came from something that they aren't currently acting on, right? Maybe they made their millions 10 years ago, and who knows if the ideas that worked then still work in the same way today, right? So you learn that through iteration and seeing things actually play out in the real world. There are things to be gleaned from others who are doing the same, but ultimately, proof of the pudding's in the eating. Are you getting the results that you want to from the actions that you're putting into practice? Does that make sense?
Yeah. Test it and mastermind with people that are also testing it.
Exactly.
Otherwise, AI can put the con in confident.
That's right. I love that. That is a great way to put that. Absolutely. But so all of this, what we've discussed, I mean, it's the deep dive understanding into ultimately the simple thing that I sought to do is I'm always looking for the opportunities. How can I make it so that what I'm already doing or need to do anyway create a leveraged outcome? Creates more than the sum of its parts, creates the thing that I'm looking to create anyway. And so I'm always looking to run tests, see what the results are, report back what I'm finding, because I think in this world that we're moving into, that information is actually useful. And the hardline opinions that are just based on who knows what are becoming less and less useful, as we got to see what's actually working right now in the real world. And so how can I turn my meetings into content? How can I turn sales calls into content? How can I extract those nuggets from that so that I'm able to show up in a leveraged way while not having to hire a massive team in order to do so? And that's really part of the opportunity that AI is offering in this, is that there are so many more opportunities to create and extract your unique perspective from what you're already up to, and then just reflow it and readapt it into the ways that are really geared toward things like marketing content and emails and landing pages and all of that.
Right. I love that. See, what other questions do I have, if any? I feel like when you walk me through your process, what I love about this is my unique view. And I mean, you mentioned it does it without any additional recordings. That's the reason I think it's so important to have either a Fathom transcriber, or I'm going to try Fireflies because it's got an API, and then have a group of people that you can share real world experience with. This seems like things that, you got the book 12-week year where they talk about I think we're at a place where compound interest can really compound daily.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And there really are. We are still in the midst. We've talked about this a while back, but while I think the AI landscape isn't changing as quick as it was kind of when ChatGPT first came onto the scenes, there was a period of time where it was like every week there were massive new announcements. We're not quite there. It's slowed down to once a month. Maybe.
But still massive improvements once a month.
Yeah, exactly. But what's interesting is even though the improvements and the changes in the software isn't necessarily changing as quickly as it was, we are still kind of in a new reality of sorting through where are all the places that this impacts how we do business day to day. And all of that is still being discovered by practitioners, by people who are in the weeds, leveraging it, putting it to use, seeing where it's useful, where it's not, what is it capable of, what is it not capable of. And that has been, for me, locking arms with other people who are doing this work, who are getting in the weeds, who are putting it to test and seeing what's working. That's where some of the biggest insights and impacts have come for me, is being able to see what's actually practically being useful. Not what are the, because all the companies are going to lean on the hype and the pie in the sky vision of, someday it'll be able to do this. It's well, cool. That's fun and exciting, but what can I use it for today in my business? What actually gives me a competitive edge right now? And you only learn that by either trying or by coming alongside people who are doing that. And honestly, those communities are somewhat rare because most people are just interested by the shiny objectness of it and they're not putting it into practice. So hopefully we're doing a bit more than that. We're actually making use of it and making a difference, creating new outcomes that previously weren't possible, and sharing that back into the community, sharing that together as well. So that's what we're about. That's what we're up to.
Yeah. I mean, it's totally revamped my referrals while you sleep. Version 4 is about to roll out. And I mean, it's really a 10x, we're able to produce 10x more than we have for 4 years. And it's taking right now the same amount of time. It may actually take less time soon. When my team members, we kind of joke about it. They're, 2 of my team members are in the Philippines, and they talk about these giant companies that have hundreds of employees and call centers. And they're just like, I can't believe what we're doing with our small, like ninja Navy SEAL team. And
Right.
because of this, it's really cool.
Right. And what's powerful is that it, like, again, the biggest thing is there's likely opportunity in what you're already doing. If you learn a little bit of a new skill set of how to leverage what you're already doing, things like making sure you're getting recordings of your meetings, that you're doing that kind of stuff. It's like there are processes to be able to extract your unique point of view, your unique vision. Like, as long as you are doing something that actually helps people, right? Like that creates some sort of meaningful outcome for people. If you are doing that, it's showing up in your discussions. It's showing up in your meetings. It's showing up in your sales calls. It's showing up in your trainings. It's already there. You're doing something that's helping people. If you could extract that and be able to leverage that for things like your marketing, for your emails, for your landing pages, for your presentations, or turning those same aspects of what other people are doing into those things that they need. Like, there's a lot of power there. And shoot, even further, like, not just from the marketing angle. The other place that we're doing that is we're extracting SOPs and trainings and documentations and templates and stuff that we use internally. Like, everywhere where these insights are being shared, they could be turned into the assets that people need to actually use them pretty readily. And that's a real opportunity. So like today we talked about how I turned a meeting with my assistant into the content that I needed. But those opportunities exist across the board and are likely a lot simpler to enact once you know how to do so and know what those opportunities look like and how to make them happen.
Yeah, I mean, what would happen? And that's what I asked. Like, what if I could save myself just an hour a week? Like, what if I could help my teammates save 30 minutes a day? You know, and then that compounds because now I can do more high impact. And I mean, now, I know for me, we've probably saved 40 hours a week in our total process across our 3 team members. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, the way that I describe that, I think where most people are missing the opportunity with AI is that they're getting too caught up in the future vision of what might be possible, of AI that's able to do everything for you. They're getting really excited by a really hyped out version of what's possible. And they're missing the opportunity of how it can help you right now, right? The way that I've described it is, the common saying is, stepping over dollars to pick up pennies. And I think what actually happens with AI is people are stepping over 1,000 pennies to pick up $1, right? Yeah. But they're not even picking up the dollar. Right? Like
they're searching for the future dollar.
And the opportunity right now, it looks like I've got this one thing that normally takes me an hour and I can make it take me, 30 minutes, right? But that's a half-hour savings, right? And often it's like I have this thing that normally takes me an hour and I can make it take 10 minutes. But like they're missing those opportunities. And when you add those up, it starts looking like one person is able to do the work of 10 people previously. But it doesn't happen in one go. It doesn't happen where you just give somebody the perfect prompt and they're able to do this. It's the kind of battle that is done task by task, and those savings compound. Those savings add up over time. And sometimes it's not time saving. Sometimes it's quality. Sometimes it's now I'm able to leverage an employee that used to only be able to do certain types of work. Now they're able to do more. They're able to do more kinds while still getting the kind of quality that we're looking for. And so there's lots of opportunities for sure. Definitely, be on the lookout for them. So hopefully this was useful and helpful for you guys to be able to see these opportunities for how you could leverage what you're already up to create all the content that you need, all the marketing assets that you need. This is a live example. Literally before this call, I ran this process and that's what created the impetus for recording it. But yeah, if you're interested in this kind of information, you want to stay up to date on what we're doing, make sure that you are subscribed to the newsletter itself. ZachHammer.me is the best place to do that. You can get subscribed to what we're up to with this show, what we're up to with what we're doing. We are officially strategically releasing this show and this newsletter in a consume your way sort of approach where you can listen to it via audio, you can watch a video, or you can read an article. The article isn't your typical show notes. It's designed to be the full context of the show in an actionable way. So no matter your preferred way of consuming this content, we've got a way for you to do so. If you want to dive further, if you want some extra help, be on the lookout for the different products that we're offering, as well as what we're up to with Ampentel Elite. Look for those notifications of when it opens up, or if you want to make sure that you are first in line on that waiting list when we do open up access, reach out to me, Zach at ZachHammer.me, or shoot me a message on Facebook, and I'd love to get you on that waiting list. But otherwise, Charlie, thanks so much for helping lead the way and guide people through this content. That was useful for me to have you ask the questions. So for you, any final thoughts or final words that you think we should leave people with on this episode?
As you're doing your task today, think about how you could shave 10 minutes, 20 minutes. If you got a question, reach out to Zach, ask him, like, hey, is there a way that I can shave time off of this? And it's like, now's the time to do it.
Absolutely. Well, there you go. On that note, I'm Zach Hammer. It's Charlie Madison. Thanks so much, and we'll catch you on the next one.
Thanks for tuning in to the Real Estate Growth Hacker Show. Remember, done is better than perfect. To turn the marketing ideas and tactics you just learned into real growth for your real estate business, visit us at realestategrowthhackers.com. If you like this episode, consider sharing it with another real estate professional who could benefit from the information, or maybe you'd like to subscribe to the show to never miss an episode. You can leave a rating or review on iTunes with your biggest takeaway, helping this show to reach and help more people just like you. Thanks again, and we'll see you on the next episode.